we have an important Audit Tuesday topic today. So recently, 60 credit unions were hacked via their MSP provider, Trellance. The hack sent alarms through both the financial as well as the managed service communities. To help us explore this event, we have cybersecurity and digital forensic expert Greg Kutzbach to help with this conversation. Hi, Greg.
Hey there. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. Thank you for being here. So we will also have Garrett Grajek, YouAttest CEO, to talk about identity, and Kashif, our Director of Deployment, to do a demo on after the breach identity investigations with YouAttest. Hi, everyone.
Greetings, Ashley. Happy day, y'all.
Hello,
So,
Ashley.
hi, Kashif. So first, let's start with Greg. So can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what a digital forensic expert does?
Of course. So my name is Greg Kutzbach. I'm owner of Exhibit A Cyber out of Orange County, California. And forensics, the word forensics just means evidence to be used in legal cases. That's literally all it means, really straightforward, evidence to be used in legal cases. So digital forensics is we ensure that digital evidence is preserved and analyzed and following proper chain of custody so it can be used in legal cases. Copy-paste screenshots just don't cut it in this business. So we're trained in legal matters and cybersecurity and IT specializations ranging from enterprise and cloud all the way down through power plant control systems. So I basically help lawyers and businesses navigate the process of building defensible cases.
Perfect. So Garrett, can you first help us understand how were 60 credit unions hacked at one time?
Yeah, and that's a good question because many of us when we think of banks or credit unions or etc., we think of a brick and mortar. There they are. They have their own counters. They have their own people, and so they have their own servers, right? They have their own servers and their own software. No, that's not really how it is in the credit union and many other spaces. There is a managed service provider under regulations of the NCUA that is under guidelines and is usually collective software across multiple entities. In this case, multiple credit unions. In this case, a very quality provider, Trellance was the provider, and their operations was called ongoing operations. And they were using a piece of software that was hacked, and then Greg will be going into that, and then it affected multiple credit unions at once.
That's scary. So MSPs are crucial to cybersecurity then.
Absolutely, yes.
And Greg, Garrett, and the research shows that the attackers used an attack called Citrix bleed. What is that?
All right, so I'm going to go into a little bit of detail here. First of all, when we're talking about vulnerability, we always use the CVE number. So in this case here, it's CVE 2023-4966. So 4966. We got a couple other ones we're going to throw in here too. That's Citrix bleed. It's a buffer overflow vulnerability in Citrix NetScaler ADC, which stands for Application Delivery Service, and Citrix Gateway. That's when it's deployed in customer environments. And as a note, this does not affect Citrix managed cloud services. So in order to really understand why this is actually something, you have to understand what NetScaler ADC and Citrix Gateway actually does. It gives remote users access to internal applications in the internal network. In a lot of ways, you might make this akin to like a VPN. So yeah, it's giving you the keys to all the valuable things in your organization. They're typically, these gateway appliances are typically deployed in the DMZ environment, but once the users are authenticated, they're granted access to more privileged organizational resources. So what Citrix bleed is attackers can hijack existing sessions via session tokens. Once the sessions are hijacked and initial access is established, then the attackers can take secondary actions, such as privilege escalation and lateral movement, which in turn enables them to do all the bad stuff you hear, the downstream damage, the stuff into the org, including data encryption, ransomware, things like that. And what makes this really kind of nasty is that even after patching the servers, the hijacked sessions can persist, and threat hunting needs to be used to flush out those attackers. The name Citrix bleed isn't arbitrary. It's named bleed because it bleeds out the organizational secrets. So when you hear Citrix bleed, it's through the Citrix application, aka NetScaler, aka what's it called, Citrix Gateway. It's bleeding out session tokens. In session tokens, anyone that's logged in as an admin, as an HR person, as a finance, as a person that holds the company's secrets, you can now log in as them without having to authenticate directly to the username, password, and the MFA. You just get right in. Okay, so this is being used by Lockbit 3.0 ransomware affiliates, which is a lot. It's one of the larger ransomware groups in the world, and multiple threat actor groups to conduct ransomware attacks at professional services, technology, and government organizations, including the credit unions that are the star of the show in this talk. And I just want to hit just a little bit of history on this just so you kind of understand the patch cycle on it. So October 10th, Citrix releases the updates. October 17th, Mandiant says, we saw it in the wild. People are actually exploiting these things. So October 10th, October 17th. Now you have Trellance and their FedComp product. Think of it the same thing pretty much. And that's November 26th, they have the attack. So October 10th, updates happen. October 17th, we see it in the wild. Month and 5 weeks later, they're hit. They had time, they had notification, they didn't do anything about it. There you go. That was the attack on the credit unions, the attack on HTC Global Services, a large MSP in the healthcare market. Both healthcare and finance is critical infrastructure in America. They had a similar attack by the Black Cat ransomware group using the same darn things. These things are happening all over the place. Now, the reason why I wanted to get the dates just real quick is that CVE 2023-3519. Don't forget, the first one I talked about was CVE ending in 4966. Now we're talking in CVE ending in 3519. That was exploited back in June. Almost the exact same thing. Almost the exact same thing. It allowed a web shell, which allowed them to get credentials, maintain persistence, and it was the exact same thing with the exact same outcome, just a different set of groups that were being hit by it. 2019, same thing, CVE 2019-19781. And in this case here, it was particularly bad because people would put the patches in, say, I'm good, we're good, we patched, we did our thing. But because of persistence, 54% of the people that were that patched their servers that said we're good were still compromised. So of all the compromised systems, 54% of them were patched. So patch management is not a panacea. It's good, please do it, but you got to do more. Anyway, so that's a little bit about it, a little bit of the history, and guess what? History repeated itself. This is not new. It's more of the same.
So the hackers were able to get the credentials, right?
Yeah. They didn't actually get the credentials. They got the session tokens because they didn't need the credentials. They used the session tokens to get right in. But once they were in, they were able to access secondary methods such as Mimikatz and LSA secrets in order to dump the credentials. So it's really, when you're talking about these things, it's all about secondary methods and what they can do downstream rather than what the initial access is. Initial access is the front door, and then you go through all the side doors and you go into the key safe and you have at it.
So were they able to bypass MFA as well?
Yes, it was a non-issue.
Yeah, so Greg, that's kind of, I love session hacking because it is like you said, you can have all your MFA in the world, all that kind of stuff. What people have to understand is once the session begins, that's who you are. That's the whole concept. That's you. You are just the session. And that's what the hackers did when they stole the Okta support session tickets, right?
Yeah. The same thing with Electronic Arts and a bunch of other high notoriety attacks.
And we'll probably do another webinar and say that because that's where I'm all about, zero trust. So if we can basically reevaluate the session ticket on that identity and that actions, we can actually provide some security. Because right now, the way it always is you do some type of authentication and then voila, you're granted the session ticket and you're good to go. Okay. That's why locking down users and user privileges is so important. Keep going, Ashley. Just had to interject.
No
100%.
worries. So patching is obviously important to these type of vulnerabilities, right?
Oh, absolutely. Patching is critical to keeping your infrastructure secure, but also knowing everything around patching is also important. So patching is important. Knowing when to call for an emergency patch and rush a patch is important. Knowing when to sound the alarm and say now. I don't care how much outage, we got to do it now. And then when you patch, you got to not just press the update button, but you actually have to read the threat advisories. In this case, patching didn't mean that you're good. It means that you're patched against future. But any threat actors with established connections get to persist, and you have to kick them out. If the people, the 2019 one, I don't have the stats off this one, would have read that same advisory, they would have done the extra steps, but over 50% of people didn't. So yes, patching is important, but it's not even everything, even when we're just talking about patching.
So, Garrett, when you talk about hacking, you often talk about the cyber kill chain and how it relates to identities. Can you talk how that's relevant to this attack?
Yeah, I like it because Greg already alluded to it, and he said two steps that hackers always do, and then in the middle. But I'll start at the beginning. The cyber kill chain basically is saying, this is going to relate to this hack and the others, is hackers are looking at us and they decide who they want to hit, right? In this case, it's credit unions. Why? Because they got money. To do reconnaissance, they figure out who is the provider, right? Then they figure out who's the actual software they're using. Greg was just saying things like Mimikatz and that kind of stuff. That means they're using stuff that has all the tools. They just point their scanning mechanisms at us. Then they say, okay, you're running this software. You got these patches, right, Greg? That's where they're doing a Citrix bleed. And then they send, and this is what people don't always understand, these are prepackaged vulnerabilities. This is everyone from, extensive, from just script kiddies to advanced organizations. The vulnerabilities are already written once they find the CVE. So let me talk through the cyber culture. The companies, the hackers, they are companies actually, they're enterprises. Hackers do reconnaissance on us. Then they do the intrusion, usually, figure out what the vulnerability was. And then the actual payload is your exploitation. Okay, what's really relevant to this one is that's why we're talking session tickets. What they do to us next is privilege escalation. Let's get us, and this is what Kashif is going to go in to make sure that the privileges after the hack stayed at a minimal level. They do privilege escalation, and then with that, they do what's really nasty, the lateral movement across our enterprises. And that's why do they want to move across? Well, fine, they're on someone's device. What the hell did that got? That's the daughter's volleyball schedule. What I want to do is I want to get over to the servers, right? And I want to get the data. I want to get the real stuff, the PHI, the PII, CUI data that I can ransomware. That's the lateral movement. And then lastly, from there, then they do the exfiltration, right? But in the meantime, they also want, and this was a Greg, I'll let go into a little more, they want to cover up their tracks, right? They want to do a little sweeping and say, I did that or whatever. And we have to make sure that we have the triggers in place and we have the mechanisms in place to recognize when the privilege escalation have and when they're trying to cover their tracks. So that's why I always like to go through the cyber kill chain.
Greg, so identities are a crucial part of the attacker's toolkit, right? As is privilege escalation.
Oh, absolutely. Identity is everything. Identity gives you privilege. So everything about identity, especially enforcing least access privilege, detecting privilege escalation is an important part of the detect in the cybersecurity mantra. Detect, recover, respond. So yes, absolutely.
So once an attacker gets in, he wants to raise his privileges and stay resident, right, Greg?
Absolutely. They want to get to the impact as quickly as possible, especially these days. In the old days, they would sometimes lay dormant for weeks or months, but these days they don't lay dormant like they used to. I went to a conference recently where CrowdStrike did a presentation on this, and they said on their most recent incidents over the last two quarters of this year, the time from initial detect until impact is 48 hours. So they don't lay dormant like they used to. You get your access, you create persistent, you elevate the privileges, you move laterally, you create some impact, and and profit.
Garrett, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I love what Greg said. That's from the field is that they're in there, they're attacking our system. So you need both. You have to be reviewing the identities of them, but you also need your triggers in there, and that's where Kashif will show in his demo that we and there's another point, Greg. I think we definitely want to bring up, which you did a good job in the discussions. You were saying straight out that when they're hacking and they get in there, right? I thought it was what's this? I that thought escaped my brain. Take it away, Ashley.
We'll come back to it.
Yeah.
Kashif, can you go ahead and show a demo?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Let me just go ahead and share my screen and
So what
show the
Kashif's
product in
gonna do,
action.
he's gonna make
Yes.
show it. Oh, I know, Greg. What I wanted to build up is you're saying that there's a lot of focus in your discussion with customers on that in the thought that patching itself is going to be the cure-all, right? And what you did a great job earlier, and I want to give you a chance to highlight it again, is okay, you do your patching, but maybe you're a couple days late or whatever, they're already in your system. How are you going about to detect any changes in your system that happen between? They did a great job of itemizing. Vulnerabilities Hill got published, right? And then you patch X number of days. Maybe they're already in your system. And when you throw in your patch, if you're not doing any due care on your systems, if you're not doing any due care in your systems to identify changes in privileges and changes in identity and changes in your systems, you're just as vulnerable as if you were patched, 2 years from then. They're in there already, So
Yeah. That's exactly right. And the way that you kick them out is by detecting using tools that will help you look for changes. In this case here, we'll be going into it with Kashif, that identities are changing, new identities are being created, roles are being escalated, and then using proactive threat hunting, which is much at that point you have an incident. It's not you're not just proactively threat hunting, but you likely have an incident, so you're going in a little bit harder. But yeah, you're looking for new RDP sessions. You're looking for RMM tools like Splashtop, and you're looking for many indicators which says the attackers are setting up a camp over here, and they're going to be hitting you from over here pretty soon. But,
Right. So I hope you can see my screen, so we could just go into what happens after the incident has occurred. And this is the YouAttest dashboard. The incident I'm showing is tightly integrated with one of my identity stores. It's Azure AD, but I have also integration with Okta or any identity store out there. It could be the on-prem AD, it could be JumpCloud, it could be something else. But once we plug into it, we are able to pull the entitlements, and we are able to pull the user information, just the metadata, to see who has access to what within your systems. So let's say it's an Azure AD, and after the incident, we just want to see what happened in there. Maybe there's something in the admin group for those Azure users and Azure environment. So we just go there, simply create a campaign for let me just go ahead and just do this, name it test. You need to provide a date within which your reviewers and the admin, they will have to complete the process, let's say a week from now. And now I am looking for the Azure admin group, because maybe let's assume the attack happens from one of those IDs that are part of the admin groups. So I just wanted to see what changed in there and get it reviewed by the relevant individual within the organization. It could be the group admin, group owner, or it could be the direct line manager. So I'll just go ahead and select the admin group that's as a target. That's my Azure admins right here. And I want to see all the users, not only the active users, but all the users in there. And when it populates the audit here, I'll see all the users that are part of the admin group, along with the details of what can they do within the system, depending upon their roles, right? So I see here the application administrator, the authentication administrator, and then maybe with this one, I see Azure DevOps administrator, permissions management administrator, and so forth. But as an admin, I don't know if those are the right privileges, those are the right roles for each of these individuals here. So instead of me deciding upon what to do next, I'll just go ahead and assign it to the relevant individuals within the organization. Could be the manager, it could be the group owner who exactly knows who should have what kind of privilege within the organization. And if there is anyone who has escalated the privileges, the group admin would know. And it's easier for him to kick that person out or kick that ID out of the system. So I'll just go ahead and please.
That was great, Kashif. And this is where the power of the tool is. You know, it takes a village to secure an enterprise. And that's the way YouAttest believes it, right? It is not just a single CISO or the group that says, okay, how can the security group actually understand and know all the right privileges? They don't. That's impossible. That's the whole concept of NIST PRAC-4, the concept in the cybersecurity framework that says you should do a user access review on a regular basis. And what Greg and I talked about before this webinar was that this is the type of actions enterprises should be taking after a breach or a known breach or a hack or something as big as Citrix bleed that can steal your session tickets and you got the patch in 4 days later. Well, vulnerabilities are automatic. This is the type of action Kashif has shown, is that the risk manager can say, I better be reviewing all these admin privileges, and I don't know the right ones, so I'm sending it over to Bob or whoever, right, Kashif?
Absolutely. So this, please, Greg.
I just want to throw in one more thing. During an incident response, you know what eats up a lot of time? Meetings, meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. You're not actually getting your work done. You're sitting around a table trying to have everyone figure out what's going on. And there's usually a massive lack of documentation.
I didn't expect that answer, Greg, but God, you're right. I was like, holy crap. I didn't know you were going with that. I was like, man, oh man. There you go.
And so basically, especially if we're dealing with a complex, large organization, so we're not talking about the onesie twosie IT shop that has a couple of high-level admins. No, you have an entire hierarchy of the IT department with a separate security department. You have everything. This answer is really hard to get. It's really hard to flush out real versus not real, or normal versus not normal. Especially if YouAttest wasn't brought in as a early tool, but was brought in as a tool to help with the impact process. So essentially, this visibility is probably at least 5 or 6 meetings right here.
I like
exactly, and that comes in even when you go for the first meeting, you can go with the incident response, the component of one of the incident response, that this is what we have done so far, and this is what we know. So
and
that
so this is a good tool to
yeah.
make people more efficient. It's a good tool, and Greg uses his service to make people efficient. Now, don't be wrong. If you're lonely, go have the 5 meetings. Okay, who am I to say don't?
There's no time for it. Your business is burning.
But if you want to be efficient, let's go. Sorry, Kashif. I don't know why I felt that. Keep going.
Yeah, so once you assign it to or delegate it out to the relevant person in the organization, just to view those and review those identities and identify if there has been a privilege escalation recently, that person or that individual is going to get an email just like this one here. And it will tell him to participate in this admin group audit, that he needs to identify and find out the culprit, if there is any, and kick him out of there. So that's the view of that individual. He sees only these two individuals reporting to him. So he goes, well, okay, let me see what Azar has, or let me see what Share has in terms of privileges. Okay, this person is okay. I mean, he doesn't have any other privileges other than they have been granted. But this role here, it should have been only the application administrator. Well, where is this authentication administrator role coming from? So this is not what we want for this individual. So let's go ahead and revoke his access. So he cannot do more damage to what exactly to what he has already done.
So I'm just gonna double in. That's a remediation step right from here that you didn't have to dive into two or three different dashboards to go do.
Exactly.
So, all right, just loving that little step right there. That little 2-click that you just did. That's a half an hour. Yeah.
That saves a lot of time, because this is all the manager or the group owner has to do. And then when it comes to me as the admin, I'll just go here, little refresh, and I see somebody's access has been revoked. I can go back in here and execute these revocations right from within this tool, and it will be written, it will be replaced and updated inside my Azure AD upon execution. So I can do it on these actions on the application or the group level, or I can do it on overall user access level from Azure AD. So once this is done, the person, the target is out, it's been kicked out. He no longer has access to either the application or the group or the overall Azure AD environment. So he's gone. Now, the same is the case when something happens inside an application. So you have, for example, you have a finance application. As an admin, you don't know who should have what kind of access to this application. You just need to pull the audit from Azure AD, assign it to their respective managers through audit delegation. They get the email notification along with the link, and then they decide, well, this person, for example, Kyle, he was part of the marketing department. What is he doing in the finance team? Right? That's not the right thing. I mean, that's not the right ID that should be here. Or he should not have the privileges it's showing he has today. So let's go ahead and, kick this person out of that application so he doesn't have any access to it. After this, once this all is, you have done all this, you can place these triggers to avoid these kind of situations in the future. So let's say you have these triggers here. For example, my identity system is Okta. I go and create a group event and set conditions in there. Well, I want to see whenever the user is added to a group, and I also want to see when a user is removed from a group.
This is really cool. So what Kashif is showing is, hey, is Greg intelligently said, sometimes these hackers are in and out of our systems in 48 hours. Wouldn't you want to be triggered when they do privilege escalation? And that's what Kashif is showing.
And just to jump in one more piece on that is a lot of threat hunters, they only look at admin accounts. They think that all attackers are ever going to do is escalate to admin. However, what I've seen is that, especially when it comes to finance, the attackers will oftentimes want to know how liquid you are, what your cash looks like in your business, which is generally in your account books. So they want to know how much they can ransom you for, and what you can actually pay. So obviously you can do that by admin, but if they're trying to be stealthy, they can try to get themselves into a lower level role that may not be as scrutinized.
That's really
exactly, and that's where these triggers come in. So not only on the group level, but you can also put these conditions on an application level or a user level, right? So.
And if I can just throw in one more thing, I'm sorry. I love
identity. Your input is great.
I'm a nerd. I actually like identity. So
that's great.
So up till now we've talked about the external threats. I also want to talk about internal threats.
Yeah,
and sometimes good people do bad things. So sometimes if someone used to have access to a system, and now
bad people get good jobs inside people's companies. But keep going. Yes,
we can spin this a lot of different ways. Yeah.
Yes. Keep going.
So if a person used to have access to a system, and legitimately, and then they get moved to another area of the company and they realize, hey, I still have access into that. Sometimes they can leverage that old access to give to create insider threats, to create the ability to embezzlement or to look at things they shouldn't see, like HR issues or payroll issues or things like that are private, and they can use that for somehow personal gain. It may not be direct theft, but it very well may be something that is either illegal or just against the rules or policy or lots of things. But again, it should be able to be caught. And some of these business rules, this business logic is so complex that unless you have these conditions already built, you're never going to find them. That person's going to have that wrong role for years before it just happens to come up somewhere.
I literally, Greg, in real time, since I love the LinkedIn Live format, someone wrote me on LinkedIn and who's a certified fraud examiner said, Greg is so spot on because not only is it the hackers, credit unions, financial institutions are ludicrously overprivileged. And they really got to be cutting back to eliminate and at least mitigate an insider threat. So great point.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Greg. And so yeah, so these conditions work in a very, very helpful way where whenever these changes occur in real time, you or whoever you designate here, because it's not only about the conditions, it's about when that condition is met, what to do after that. So you can put some actions here by checking this box which says create a campaign and assign it to a specific person within the organization in real time so that that person could go in and see what's actually going on. And he has the ability to either agree or disagree to the action or to the change that is happening. And if he disagrees, then that privilege is not granted. So that's how you can stop these kind of escalation privilege escalations in the future after you have identified the culprit from the after the breach, after the incident. But these triggers will help you out both from outside the organization and from within the organization, as you just mentioned, that anyone with a role change, anyone who's trying to escalate the privileges, getting into some group or trying to get access to some application within the system, you or somebody you designate will be the first one to know that this is happening. And you can stop it right there instead of just waiting days and weeks for that to happen, or something goes bad after you grant this access to that certain ID. So once this condition is met, you see those event audits here under auto audits, and as a reviewer, you can get in, either certify the access, or you can deny the access by revoking it or disagreeing to it. So yeah, that's what we can do today after the incident has happened, just to avoid anything of the same nature in the future.
That's really good. And just for those keeping score, the CISA Zero Trust Maturity Model, that puts you on the governance trail of not just initial, but advanced.
And also, zero trust is hard, just to be totally frank. If you really want to understand zero trust, in my opinion, it's the O'Reilly book, Zero Trust, and it is absolutely amazing. But it shows that it's really tackling one of the hardest problems in cybersecurity, which is key management. That's really the root of everything. If you can solve key management, you can solve cybersecurity pretty much. But we've been working on it for the better part of a century, and we're struggling still.
Yeah, but we got to identity these down. There's no hacking in there, so we're good. Keep going, Ashley. And Kashyap, great demos. Let me just review. We always should review. What Kashyap showed you is how you can take a look at the groups, right? And that's what your roles are, and that's what you should do after a breach, is make sure they didn't do privilege escalation in your groups. You should look, as Greg said intelligently, make sure you check out your apps, because the permissions on those things is not only Greg, but a CFE online said, make sure that the permissions are locked down on those. And then lastly, let's start having triggers on the key privileges, okay? And to create actions and into escalate those into the right people and review those changes in privileges.
Yeah,
Take it away.
and like you said, trigger is the key word there. Because it's, don't forget, 48 hours is the median time you have to detect an attack. So that means you can't be doing this quarterly. You need to be staying on top of it.
Nice.
I mean, a lot of companies never do this. So I mean, if you haven't done it, you could do it every now and then. But preferably a trigger on these sort of changes.
So, Greg, YouAttest would be a useful tool to ensure that enterprise admin privileges were not manipulated by the hackers, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to just say this very, very clearly. Identity is complex, and YouAttest is a fantastic tool, both as a preventative and a corrective measure.
Thanks.
Perfect. So I think we should wrap this up. So, Greg, why don't you tell the audience how to reach you?
Sure. www.exhibitacyber.com has all of our contact information, phone numbers, emails, whole shebang. Give us a call. We love talking to people, helping them out.
Yeah, let me interject before we wrap up. And team, it's a great tool. It is useful and all that. That's why we partner with people like Greg. He can understand it. He can get it working for you. He can manage this for you as well if you're not comfortable. That's really key. Tool plus services, and that's where Greg comes in. Take it away, Ashley.
Perfect. And then us at YouAttest, we can be reached at info@youattest.com, and we'll execute on your identity governance for anti-ransomware and compliance needs. Thank you so much for joining us, Greg. We really appreciate it.
It's a lot of fun. Can't wait till next time.
That was a lot of fun.
Absolutely.